I only had one Bible reading, born again Christian friend, only one, which was enough.
Welcome to the Eden Podcast, where we true the verse of Genesis 3:16, and we discover that God didn't curse Eve or Adam or limit woman in any way.
This is the Eden Podcast. I'm Bruce C.E. Fleming, Executive Director of the Tru316 Foundation. Our website is Tru316.com, and we're looking forward to a special interview today. Joanne Hagemeyer, my co-host, would you introduce our guest?
That would be my pleasure. Thank you, Bruce. We are here with Terran Williams, a pastor and church planter in Cape Town, South Africa. He's also the author of A New Believer's Guide to Church Planting, Reach for Life, a youth Bible concentrating on discipleship, and most recently, How God Sees Women, the End of Patriarchy. Terran also leads Signal Church in the middle of Cape Town, and he is married to Julie, and they have 5 kids. And we're glad to have you with us, Terran.
Lovely to be with you.
Terran,
Just a warning, one of my children might bust in the door. I've told them to stay out, but that does happen where they come plunging into the room.
They know they belong. Come right into the throne room. Yeah, that's great. So, Terran, you're in the ministry. You've been doing it for a while. We've seen you on YouTube and Facebook and lots of other places. And in print, I've got your book right here on my phone. So we'll get into that in a second. But the way we like to start is we like to know what your faith story is. How did you come to know Christ and start to grow in him?
Yeah. So I grew up in a completely non-religious home. I grew up in Sea Point, Cape Town. It's a very cosmopolitan part of Cape Town City. When you think Africa, think of something different. It's more like a European outpost at the southern tip of Africa. And my parents got divorced when I was 5. The reason was my father was gay and he had an affair and he chose the gay lifestyle. And my brother and I lived with my dad and his partner up until I was 16. And my father was one of the first 100 people in the country to die of HIV/AIDS. The virus hit the male gay community first, and my dad was in that group. And I probably was just a superficial teenager before that, committed to surfing and girls and partying. But when my dad died, I was suddenly asked questions about the meaning of life. What happens when you die? That question suddenly meant something to me. I also knew existential pain for the first time. And my friends didn't quite know what to do with me. I only had one Bible reading, born again Christian friend, only one, which was enough for God to reach me. Yeah. And he did a pretty good job with his grieving friend, because he would come up to me and ask me how I was doing, coping with my dad's death. Other people didn't know what to do with me. They just avoided the subject. And I remember him phoning me, and then I spoke to him and I said, I'm so glad my dad is in heaven. That brings comfort to me. So he said, what do you think heaven is like? I said, I have no idea what heaven is like. And then he said, do you think you're going to heaven when you die? And I'd never doubted that I'd go to heaven when I die until he asked me the question. And I assured him that I would go to heaven. The question was absurd, but it got under my skin. And that night I spoke to my best friend, who was he was actually a drug dealer. and he I sent him to Nathan's Christian youth group to check it out, and he became a Christian. And then I realized, I mustn't go anywhere near that. I felt really bad that I'd sent my friend to check out Nathan's youth group. But now I had 2 Christian friends working on me, and they invited me to church. I said no, but then their church organized a surf camp. And there's a ministry called Christian Surfers International, and they try to build a bridge between the beach and the church. If the surfers won't come to the church will come to the beach. And I agreed to go on the surf camp, and I was struck by how genuine some of the people on this camp were. And the best surfer on the camp was also the camp speaker. And with surf by day, this guy had my respect. And then at nighttime, he would open up the Bible and his life and share stories. And about the 5th or the 6th night, he shared the gospel story, very simply, a story of Jesus saving sinners. And it was like God summoned me. My heart started to beat fast, and I just knew this was real. And next thing, I was praying a prayer to give my life to Jesus, and I was like the lights got switched on, and they've never been switched off. And I was 16 years old. I got instantly converted to an evangelist. I literally got the idea, well, now that I knew the truth, I just explained to everyone else and they would get it too. It did shock me some that it didn't work as well on other people as it had on me. But I had the stubborn idea that if I just told them about Jesus, they could know it too, and tell them the difference he'd made in my life. And he really did make a dramatic difference in my life. Came alive to joy. I had a lot of heartbreak to deal with in my own life, losing my dad, my parents' divorce, those kind of things. And God did a really good job in the early years of my faith, bringing healing. Every time there was singing to Jesus, I would just weep. I just thought for the rest of my life, I would weep every time I was in God's presence. But there came a day where the weeping stopped, and I realized that actually all of that weeping was God's just healing a broken heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the start of my faith. And then I decided I wanted to serve Jesus every day of my life, and I went straight into Christian ministry. Most of my friends who are in Christian leadership, did a few years in the marketplace, if not decades. I have done no years in the marketplace. I have went straight into church leadership. I studied some on the side, but I've basically been in church leadership my entire adult life. And a few years ago, 2019, I came to the end of a 20-year season in the leadership of a church. And it was a bit of a painful ending. And I thought, I don't want to be in Christian leadership anymore, but I love Jesus. And I knew that I had a writing gift. So I thought I would write books, and that would count as Christian ministry. And then two and a half years ago, someone persuaded me to agree to a part-time leadership of a church just for 6 months while they look for a pastor. Well, 2.5 years later, I'm now still leading this church, and I part-time write books and part-time lead a church.
Wow, that's a
wow,
tremendous...
that is a yes. Wow.
Joanne, do you know how to surf?
I do not. And I was born in California. That's where I spent my teen years, but I did not surf. No, I body surfed, but not the real kind.
We're in California. Where?
That's
in California.
quite a story.
Okay.
That's actually, as you were talking about your weeping, I was thinking about the cleansing work of tears and how important that is to weep as we mourn. There's something about that. Of the rich work of God. And then I thought about how God brought you out of leadership in time to write some important things. Yes. You needed that time. And then God brought you right back in because like I just finished listening to your lecture on Priscilla, like Priscilla and Aquila, that's your calling.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Joanne, go ahead. Keep going, Joanne.
Well, I mean, I was going to ask you if you would talk about how God has led you into discovering those gifts. I mean, you said you went right as a young person straight into evangelism, and you didn't experience quite as much success as you were hoping for. But that didn't stop you from continuing in leadership. How did you discover your giftedness that way?
Yeah. Well, I was still in high school. I'd been a Christian for maybe a year, and the youth leader asked me to speak on the Friday night next youth group. And I thought this was exciting. And Friday afternoon, I prepared a message, and I had the first experience of reading scripture in a sermon prep and seeing things in the word and being so excited. Wait until I get to tell them. Of course, that was once you have that taste, you're hooked for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And that night, I shared whatever I had from Ephesians chapter 6, my passage of choice. And then I said, does anyone want to give their lives to Jesus? And 10 kids put their hands up. And people patted my shoulder and told me that I had the gift of teaching and evangelism. And I was very excited that I had these gifts, and I was determined to use them for the rest of my life.
Wonderful. So you had an interesting change there, 15 years, 17 years into your ministry. Yeah. And they asked you, tell us about this assignment that you took on and how you began to study something more about church leadership.
Are we talking about my transition to male-female equality?
Yes.
Okay. So the church I was part of is a fantastic church. I mean, I send people there. People, they're looking for a church. I recommend this church. I gave 20 years of my life to it. And it was a very soft complementarian church. You get soft complementarian churches that would actually get in trouble from the true complementarian types. I'll tell you what they look like. They look like marriages that are functionally egalitarian, even though everybody theologically signs off on this idea that the husband is the leader. So you kind of theologically you agree with that, but the marriages are roughly the same as your egalitarian friend, marriages. And then the thinking is that every now and then you hit an impasse, you can't make a decision, or then the man should make the decision. But most of those scenarios never happen. So practically speaking, you got an egalitarian marriage. And then we let women preach from time to time, although you wouldn't let them deal with doctrinally ambiguous passages. You give them nice, clear passages to preach on. And then you have, leadership teams. We spoke about male elders, but their wives were kind of honorary members of the teams. And we even spoke about eldership couples. But, the man was, strictly speaking, the ordained leader, and the woman carried a commensurate grace. So very soft complementarian. Some people would call it egalitarian. So I was part of this church. And then there were some discussions. Basically, the Gospel Coalition, it was becoming very influential. You had young people that were getting excited about Reformed theology, and as presented by John Piper and Mark Driscoll for a time, and Tim Keller. And along with these authors came a very strident complementarianism that included the idea that women shouldn't preach. There was a bit of a conversation that started rising up where some of the young guys were becoming quite buxom. We shouldn't let women preach. And I was quite alarmed by this, and it started quite a conversation as more and more people got the confidence to speak up, in a sense, trying to introduce a stricter complementarianism. At the same time, there were some leaders that had been around a lot longer who expressed in the leadership team real doubts about our doctrinal position, that complementarianism was right at all. And pointed out that we'd never done really good work on this. We just referred to Wayne Grudem's article on, Kephale, and we needed to write our own position paper. And I just handed over leadership of my congregation. I was freed up to bring more preaching and theological mindedness to the church. I was very excited to lean into the space. I knew that our position was correct, that soft complementarianism was the way to go. And I just needed to pull together all of the text in the right way and write this paper. And I had time on my hands, and I thought, well, I must hear from all the sides on this angle. And for the first time in my life, I meaningfully and patiently listened to egalitarian scholars. And I couldn't believe how that I never even heard some of these angles. I'd been so taught that they were wrong, and that to listen to these guys was to head in the direction of feminism and liberalism. But when you actually listen to how scholarly these interpretations, scriptural passages were, and I read very carefully. I just read back and forth, everything I could get my hands on. And it dawned on me that probably the egalitarian scholars, although I certainly identified some flaws that I maybe still disagree with to this day, that they had a stronger case on the teaching of the Bible. The complementarians had basically looked at the whole Bible through the small key lens of 1 Timothy 2 verse 12. I don't permit a woman to teach or to authentate a man, and one particular interpretation of that. And if you look at the Bible through those lenses, you bend every other scriptural passage to reinforce that idea. And when it dawned on me that if that interpretation was questioned, and if a compelling, alternate interpretations could be put forward, the case dissipates.
Tru316 Foundation is the home of the Eden podcast. Join us for $3.16 a month or more. Let's true the verses on the key passages on women and men. Go to tru316.com/partner. Tru316 is strengthening and encouraging many, and we're getting stories every day of lives changed through our ministry. We're the home of the Eden podcast, and we're getting the word out that God didn't curse Eve or Adam or limit woman in any way. Our volunteer help is wonderful, and we grow stronger with each new Tru partner who gives to the Tru316 Foundation so that we can cover the costs to do the technical work of the Eden podcast, to coordinate our Tru school workshops like the 2-week Eden workshop on Genesis 2 and 3, and to make the Tru316 Foundation function in its outreach to scholars and students around the world. You can give now with a one-time gift. And better still, you can join now and become a monthly donor. We call our monthly donors our Tru partners. Please join now by going to tru316.com/partner.